What if I told you that the last day of preseason testing in Barcelona revealed something that not even Ferrari's engineers expected? That Lewis Hamilton was not only the fastest, but also uncovered a hidden side of the SF26 that can change the course of the entire 2026 season? Stay, because what happened in those last 15 minutes could be the key to the championship, or its Achilles heel. On January 30th, 2026, on the last day of preseason testing in Barcelona, there was a moment that, although it barely lasted 15 minutes, shook the foundations of the technical and emotional narrative that surrounded the union between Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari. Until that moment, the SF26 project had been handled with the strictest secrecy. Ferrari's records were not among the best during the previous days, and although there were signs of improvement, no one expected what was about to happen. When Hamilton took to the track for his final stint, what seemed like a simple qualifying simulation session quickly turned into a spectacle worthy of attention. The timing sensors began to flash purple partials. Nobody on the Ferrari or Mercedes wall, or even at McLaren or Red Bull, could ignore what was happening. Sector after sector, curve after curve, the SF26 flew. And on the final lap, he clocked 1 minute and 16.348 seconds. A time that not only beat everyone on the table but left George Russell in his Mercedes W17 exactly 0.097 seconds behind, despite having been the fastest the previous day. But the real impact was not in the time. What really shook up the paddock came later. When Hamilton got out of the car and approached the media, the mechanical and restrained driver who usually avoids controversy did not appear. In his place, a version of Lewis emerged that we hadn't seen in years. Relaxed, smiling, but with a gleam in his eye that revealed something much deeper. And then he said it. The car, in his own words, was more fun to drive than any other he has driven recently. He wasn't talking about pure rhythm. He talked about sensations, about how the car responded to the limit, about how it behaved when pushed in high-load areas, in late braking, in changes of direction. Hamilton described the SF26 as twitchy, oversteering and slippery, but surprisingly easy to recover from when pushed to the limit. It was, in his words, a wild but controllable machine, with which the pilot felt that he once again had something in his hands that could make a difference. These statements were not simple praise. They had weight, because they came from the same driver who had suffered the humiliation of closing 2025 without a single podium for the first time in his career. That he had arrived at Ferrari with all the pressure in the world on his shoulders. That he had witnessed firsthand how Red Bull fell into a technical tailspin, and how McLaren dominated with surgical precision. And yet, there he was talking about his Ferrari as if he'd found a new reason to believe. Furthermore, that return came just after Charles Leclerc finished his own program with a much more contained pace. That direct, though unofficial, comparison was enough for some to suggest that the SF26 might have a behavior profile so extreme that only a pilot with Hamilton's sensitivity and aggressive style could extract the most from it. And yet, the Briton's words were not just a song of victory. They also included a subtle warning. "This car is a challenge, but one I'm willing to take on," he said. A phrase that sounded like a promise, but also like a confession. The SF26 will not be easy to master. And it is likely that you will not forgive mistakes. What no one could deny after that day was that something had changed. The relationship between Hamilton and Ferrari, so questioned at the end of 2025, was beginning to write a new chapter. And this one was not based on promises or speeches, but on pure speed, authentic sensations, and an unexpected compatibility between man and machine that no one had foreseen. If this was just the first real act of their collaboration, then what's coming could be one of the most explosive and dramatic stories of the 2026 season. Because when Hamilton smiles with that sparkle in his eye, the rest of the grid knows it's time to worry. The key to what Lewis Hamilton discovered that last day in Barcelona does not lie solely in his lap time. What was truly revealing was the type of car Ferrari has designed for the 2026 season. The SF26 is not a simple evolution of the SF25. It is, in conceptual terms, a radical break with everything that the Scuderia had been building for more than a decade. And what makes this car even more fascinating is that its virtues and defects seem to be intertwined as if they were two sides of the same coin. Lewis was clear when describing the sensations he experienced: snappy, oversteery, sliding, but also more fun to drive. This statement, which in another context might sound superficial, hides very serious technical implications. In Formula One jargon, a snappy car is one that reacts abruptly to changes in direction or aggressive corner entries. It's a nervous car, prone to oversteer, which can put even the most talented drivers in trouble. However, Hamilton did not present it as a weakness, but as a virtue. Because The answer may lie in the new aerodynamic architecture that Ferrari has implemented. Although the team has not revealed all the details, several paddock analysts suggest that the SF26 prioritizes slow-medium cornering ability over full high-speed stability. This implies an aerodynamic and weight distribution designed for more active driving, where the driver has a greater role in each phase of the curve. In other words, Ferrari has built a car that can be extremely fast, if the driver has the sensitivity and courage to make the most of it. And Hamilton, with his years of experience and natural aggressive driving style, could be just the profile this design requires. But not everything is positive, because the fun feature Lewis was talking about quickly became a silent warning. During the fourth day of testing, a complete spin was recorded by the Briton in turn 10, one of the most technical sectors of the Catalan track. What caught attention was not only the error, but the way in which the SF26 reacted. The rear axle dropped abruptly, and the car completed a 360-degree turn on the runway. Hamilton managed to regain control without consequences, but the images made it clear that the SF26 harshly punishes any input outside its optimal range. And this is where the technical dilemma that could define the season appears. Because while the SF26 may be agile and lively in Hamilton's hands, that doesn't mean it's a balanced or easy car to work with for the entire team. In fact, subsequent reports revealed that several rival engineers, when analyzing the behavior of the Ferrari from the technical stands of the circuit, described it as a handful, an expression that in English is used to describe something problematic, difficult to handle, and potentially unstable. The most disturbing thing is that this behavior was not isolated. Throughout the sessions, the car showed persistent signs of oversteer, especially in long medium-speed corners. Hamilton, on more than one occasion, had to correct with the steering wheel in full support to avoid loss of control. There were even moments recorded where the SF26 left the track, not due to obvious driving errors, but due to an unpredictable reaction of the rear axle to the adhesion limit. These data were analyzed with a magnifying glass within the paddock. Because while Hamilton's lap time was eye-catching, legitimate questions were raised about the context in which it was achieved. Was it a low-fuel lap? Were you using softer compounds than usual? Was the car in an extremely aggressive setting to impress, rather than to compete? The theory of the glory run, an internal marketing strategy to generate expectations, began to circulate. However, Ferrari strongly denied that this was an attempt at makeup. In fact, they confirmed that they had chosen not to hide the true nature of the SF26 on this occasion, precisely because they wanted to collect data under real aggressive conditions. The fact that the car responded reliably and without mechanical failures for more than 200 laps with Hamilton at the wheel validated, at least in part, this more open philosophy. Still, there is an obvious paradox. Ferrari has built a car that could be the fastest on the grid, but only if the driver manages to walk an invisible tightrope every weekend. A design that rewards pure skill but punishes any deviation. And these types of machines, by history, either triumph overwhelmingly or sink in their own excessive ambition. Turn 10 in Barcelona literally became the technical confessional of the SF26. It was there where Hamilton starred in his 360-degree spin. But beyond the visual spectacle, what really worried the analysts was the ease with which the rear axle fell off without warning. There was no obvious error in the braking line, nor aggressive steering. The car simply stopped sticking to the ground. And if that can happen in a controlled environment like a test, what could happen in a race under pressure, with degraded tires, crosswinds, or heavy traffic? And this is where the crack between potential and reality appears. Because if Ferrari needs that level of surgical precision to make the car competitive, then it's not only putting pressure on its drivers, but also on every department of the team. From strategists to track engineers, everyone must be in constant synchronization to prevent the SF26 from turning against the team itself. All this leads to a conclusion as disturbing as it is fascinating. Ferrari has managed to build one of the most interesting cars on the grid, but also one of the most demanding. The line between resounding success and collapse is thinner than ever. And that makes the SF26 not just a racing car, but a living narrative. A story of calculated risk, of unfiltered ambition, and of a Scuderia that seems to have bet everything without a safety net on the talent of Lewis Hamilton. Leave it in the comments what you think about all this.